The weary traveler draws close to the end of the path.
We have never had it so good.
All of this just works.
We are selling tea to China.
You did not have to redeem this, ma'am!
Out with them, forget about them.
Your broadcast is very biased. You've written a lot of ridiculous articles, so I would encourage you to be more journalistic and have more integrity.
Socialism is when the government does stuff.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. I apologize for being slightly late. Audio issues, which have been plaguing me lately. I'm getting very close to just calling it quits. I've been dual booting Windows and Linux for a while, but I feel like at this point I'm having just as many driver issues on Windows as I'm having on Linux, and I might as well just start streaming from Linux instead. We'll have to see about that. But it's really annoying to not know, 1 week to the next when I just turn everything on and then it just doesn't work, right? But I was also setting this stream 10 minutes late because I was busy putting baby walrus to bed. I gotten quite good at that. That's like, it's a weird thing, but I realized I'm pretty good at putting the baby to bed. For some reason, like the ritual, I have it down to a science. That kid doesn't know what hit her, and suddenly she's out. So I'm crossing my fingers that, babies being babies, like every 2 weeks they like redo their whole, biology, and then suddenly she won't sleep anymore. Bloody Path, you're back as always. How are you doing?
Well, yeah, it's great to be back. Thanks for the patience, and thanks for everybody tuning in. Good evening to the Euros, and I guess good day to the Americans. Yeah, I know what it's like to try to put the kids to bed. It's kind of like the stock market. You have a strategy that works for 2 weeks, and then you have to figure out something else because it stops working when the market changes. That's always annoying. Dual booting Linux and Windows is also a project that I gave up. The town is just never big enough for 2 operating systems. It seems like it's like, yeah, it should work in theory. It's just eventually, you just dish that dream and you go with one or the other. So I went with the Bill Gates WEF reporting system.
You took the digital vax, yeah.
WEF maxed with my operating system. So, but for today we have the topics we want to do. We want to look at the potential role of podcasting in the future Norwegian elections.
If
we're going to look
time,
at Tesla boycotts and more vandalism and hassle for Elon Musk, and then maybe if we get time, we could look at the possible European remigration from the United States, which I thought was just a meme, but there's been some recent developments hinting at that might actually be a possibility to have some type of reverse brain drain coming from the United States into Europe for once, and not just the other way around.
Which way, Western man, as it were?
Go east. It's a new Pet Shop Boys song.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll just jump straight into it. Of course, I see a lot of the usual suspects in chat. It's always great to see you guys back. Do we want to do the book thing just for fun?
Yeah, let's indulge. I thought it was good.
Indulge. This is one of those things. Do you remember I talked about like a year ago or something when I found like this girl on YouTube like doing up her programming setup, and I was like, I can post this on Twitter and just farm a bunch of likes, and I did it and it went viral. This is another one of those, and I had to show restraint not to do this again because I sent this to you and I called it the female goon cave. Let's see here. Let me see. Oh no, it's being weird. Oh, one moment. Okay, here we go. So this is about a woman who talks about, she's doing a TikTok essentially. It's a YouTube short about how many books she has, and she's trying to collect 1,000. What struck me though, because we've been talking about this a little bit, and I've read a couple of articles where this has been sort of like a thing. It's been an ongoing debate in Norway about sort of the quality of books. And I was trying to scan as I was looking at this video about what kinds of books does she have.
You need 1,000 books to be considered an official library. When I first moved in, I had 444. So I'm going to recount all of my books and see where we're at now. Ready, set, go.
So you can see here, if you just, pause at random moments, this is a lot of... There's some Penguin publishing here, which might hint at something. But there's Twilight back here. I recognize some of these. I think I recognize some of these as like, well, it's what people are referring to when they talk about like modern, just spice female literature. It's a lot of, I guess maybe low hanging fruit.
1, 2,
Jarvis, zoom in. See if I can
enhance.
What is that? Sex in the City or something? No, it's something else.
No, it's what is this? I'm sorry.
100.
I recognize. I zoomed in on these. I recognize some of these. These are like romance novels. My point is, it's kind of slop, right? It's sloppy.
Top row is 136.
Airport, kiosk
200.
literature, as you would say. And I'm not expecting philosophical works here.
Time to count the third row. 283.
Oh, she has the Count of Monte Cristo, which I would guess. I guess that's. Would you call that midwit tier?
425. 290. 300.
Probably slightly better than the average. But
400. 414.
414 books.
500. I could do an auction war at this point. We're at 547. 49.
Here's a lot of these. I recognize these from going into bookstores and like seeing like book talk stands. These are a lot of these, romance novels.
600. I count in Vietnamese. South Bay, Tam, Jin, Mười, 30.
Would. Well, you have your priorities in order. That's
39.
important.
Okay.
So yeah, here you have the female goon cave. That's the equivalent, I guess.
Question: does she read?
I think she
or
reads
does she
a
just
lot.
collect books?
But I feel like this is, well, I'm sure, when you're into this number of books, I think inevitably you collect more than you read. I mean, I probably collect more than I read, right? But I've also embraced sort of I don't have to, especially when it comes to some of the philosophical works, I don't necessarily have to read everything from, cover to cover. I can look at the chapters and see if something interests me, right? And then I'll jump around a little bit. But these are obviously often fiction books, it seems, from what I can see on these, which, you kind of have to read cover to cover. So I think if she has, then what has been gained, right?
Yeah, it's a very good point. There's not much learned there. It's all kind of Netflixy style books, right? And I mean, I think most guys' Steam library looks like this, but at least that's virtual,
sure. Yeah, this is
right?
this is the Steam library for girls.
It's actual physical stuff you're not going to use. It's much better to just have it from a drop-down menu. You can download on your computer, and it's on some server.
Next
somewhere.
time we're going to scroll through my Steam library. Yeah,
you can't put that stuff in the cloud. It's just it takes up space in your home, and it's backbreakingly heavy if you have to carry it in boxes up and down. Like you have to relocate, right? This boom is going to have to move. if she's an American, I guess she moves like 25 times in her lifetime or something, and you have to move 1,000 books every time.
Times, yeah.
I don't know. Did we have some stat on that? Where this?
I think it was like 14 or something. Yeah. So it was an absurd amount.
I mean, it's one thing. I feel like with books, it's like the opposite of real estate. It's very easy to get them, and it's hard to get rid of. So, I mean, I'm not
going to dunk on her for having a hobby, right? I mean, she's just doing her thing. But it's kind of just adding fuel to the fire in the ongoing debate about, yeah, okay, the youngins are buying a lot of books, but, they're buying, as you said, it's like produced by Netflix books.
Yeah, and they won't read it anyway. I mean, but of course, it's consumption, right? I'm not going to judge it too hard, but it's funny that this is something you can flex about, just having 1,000 books that you never read.
And the most challenging thing you own is like Count of Monte Cristo. All right, so let's get on to the other article because there's one other thing we have been talking about a little bit. And this is going to be the Google machine, because this is Norwegian. And there has been an ongoing debate about sort of Gen Z. We've covered it here a bit about how Gen Z is doing it in the workforce because they're sort of slowly entering it, and how they are presenting new challenges, opportunities. There even was a couple of weeks ago on the National Debate Show a specific sort of Gen Z in the workforce debate, which I found interesting. Okay, so this guy wrote adult skills. Well, he's basically writing adulting for dummies. So this guy's going to give us all some tips. If there's any Gen Zers in the chat, pay attention. Young adults have been collecting grades for many years, but collecting adult points is going to be slower. I had a question from a relative in the early 20s the other day, and this... I'm going to have to bring up the Norwegian to translate here, just I don't get anything. And I'm not making this up. He said, I wonder, how do I pay an invoice, and what is it? He said it like, what is an invoice? Like he's making jokes about the guy not knowing how to say it even, right? What are these invoices and how do I pay them? When a lot of adults are gathered, it's rarely a long time passes, rarely short time passes before anyone mentions the young generation's lack of adult skills. One thing is that the part of life mastery that professionals would call psychosocial skills, even more precarious when it comes to ordinary, more or less practical, everyday skills. Things we as adults have to do that we don't necessarily get paid for, and that might be too embarrassing for someone else to do. So paying your bills is one of those. Like, unless you have a business, you usually don't pay other people.
I'm just trying to think a little bit about the life cycle. So yeah, I mean, I probably had a lot of these myself. That I'm not going to admit to things that I like in my 20s. I was not proficient at doing, or I just didn't know how to do. But
sure.
So let's say you're in your 20s and you don't know what an invoice is. What's the case here? You've lived with your parents and they pay every bill, and you also don't order things online, or you only order things that are so fresh.
I'm thinking he's actually gotten a physical, because that's getting rare these days as well. You're getting a physical paper invoice from a company, right?
Oh, okay.
A lot of times these days you're getting, electronic invoices, which just go straight to your bank account. And to be fair, I mean, to give this guy some points, I mean, he's in a large paper hanging his relative out to dry here a bit, but at least the relative had an adult male they could approach and be like, hey, this is kind of embarrassing, but what is an invoice, right?
Yep.
So
I mean, okay, like the most charitable case, because I have, if you have a computer job that's, you're not working in one of these big tech companies, you're working in some like a smaller business, you're going to be dealing with some invoice logic at some point. That's more or less inevitable, at least that has been for me. And you learn that like the idea of the invoice is not as straightforward as you think it is, and there are many people who stuff that you get in a regular invoice that you can't really expect necessarily from like a small company or something. Sometimes they don't have the KID number there, or it's not always clear what it's for, who it's for, where on the paper they put the necessary information you need.
Yeah.
And it's not always denoted properly. So benefit of the doubt, there are actually a lot of invoices that are confusing if you get from like sole proprietorship electrician or something.
I was paying invoices on my own before I was 18, I believe, for things, because when we did buy something that required an invoice, I was required. I mean, I did get help the first couple of times, but I was explained, how do you do it, right? I don't know.
Yeah, online banks have been around for a long time now,
especially in Norway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been for a long time. Things like posting a package or writing a CV without their emojis. Haha, the Gen Z's and their emojis, right? How to hang a lamp or to boil potatoes without setting the house on fire. Now, these two might be sort of more relevant, but that depends. I mean, it's one of those things where I got a lot better on, using power tools when we bought our house, and I actually had to do it. Like when I was living in apartments, you never had to do that stuff. So it's hard to say. Of course, making food should be a baseline, I think.
Yeah, the thing is that, okay, yes, adult failure and failure to launch and generational failure, but also you're living in like the age of the YouTube tutorial, where it's like finding this stuff should be so super easy now for people. Like you could search boiled potatoes and get some Indian guy to explain it to you in 5 minutes. So it's kind of, I don't know what to say. I mean, you have more, these resources are available, but I'm seeing increasingly people just kind of not that interested in even searching for, like, I can't be bothered just to type how to XYZ and which, like, that's what fascinates me the most, really. Like, you have these resources even now with the generative AI and stuff.
There's a difference between not knowing and this sort of like what you would call, I guess, learned helplessness that seems to be
exactly. I think that's the issue here, because if you're really interested in making potatoes and you can't be bothered to look up a YouTube tutorial or something, there's some learned helplessness there.
So here he says he has a headline called "Helicopter Kids," which I guess is the inverse of the helicopter parents. In the youth hearing of 2021, young people in Oslo were asked what gave the most adult points. This is a survey, I think. What gave them the most adulting points? Being responsible for other people, having your own apartment, meaning probably owning your own apartment, not renting, and having a job came out as the top results. Reading the paper was one of the bottom results. In a similar survey from 2007, adolescents between the ages of 18 and 25 were asked if they saw themselves as adults. Only 16% said yes, and my parents largely agreed. It's our own fault. The snow shoveling parents have swept the roads so clean and unobstructive that the children have never really had to do anything on their own other than perform PowerPoint presentations and do algebra. So, any kid born after 2005 all they know is PowerPoint presentations and algebra, right?
Eat hot chip and lie.
Yeah,
you should have listened to the boomers. Learn accounting, drop out of school, learn the trades.
I've had to guide a 16-year-old with GPS on her phone through town because she's never seen the city on a physical map. Now that's the weird one. Like, if you never learn how to sort of I think that's a guy thing as well, to a certain extent. I've done this experiment at work where you ask, like, if you're in, like, you just ask people where is north, and like 9 times out of 10, a man knows where north is, but women just don't. Like, they don't know the concept of generally always having a spatial awareness of where you are in relation to north, right? I have experienced journalists who have not been able to Google before they interview. I have heard a young couple say they don't dare to buy chicken with the skin on because they don't know how to get it off. Okay, that's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's anecdotal, but what are they putting in the water here, right?
Well, yeah, there's some learned helplessness and some kind of just skittishness there, like just afraid of experimenting, I guess, or
I guess
what do you call being just sheltered, or I mean, wouldn't it be fun to just try that, even if you mess up? The downside isn't that high. I mean, okay, you wasted a chicken, so what? Like,
yeah, I mean, I that's sort of the part of cooking I tend to enjoy when I cook is sort of I guess the art of it, right? It's not a recipe. Like, I don't like baking because you have to follow the recipe, and if you don't, then you're screwed. But cooking, I can just smell or taste things and be like, I wonder what happens if I do this, right? And sometimes it pays off, and sometimes it doesn't. It may not be adulthood that has become so much more difficult, or puberty that has become so much longer a period. It has to be something that we have overlooked. What my own daughters have the most confidence in this life is that no problem is too small to call dad for. What gift should I buy for my friend? What do I do when I receive an SMS from the tax authorities? What is the difference between still and yet? Sorry, one moment. What's the Norwegian translation here? It's a grammatical challenge. Should I wear my shoes with leather grease? What is leather fat? Or leather grease, I guess. Presumably, the best way to teach them to fend for themselves would be to hang up the phone, but it's too late for me to start with that strategy now. Therefore, I present a brief guide on how to cope with your missing adult skills when the children call home and they say, "Help, I have to take a scary phone call to a public office." So that's the meme of like the Gen Z and the millennials. We don't call places. That's gay, I guess.
Talked about this before as well. Like, this is how you psych out people who are younger than yourself. You just call them on the phone. Whenever something escalates, call the phone every time. You're going to win 100% of the time. It always works. Just that's the alpha chat dominance. If you're comfortable with a phone call, then that settles it.
Yeah. We've been graced by a rare live Florida man, which is always fun. It can be scary to talk to someone you can't see and you don't follow on Snapchat. Okay, Grandpa. But it's the job. It's the person's job on the other side to answer the phone. Pretend to be the one you're going to call. Then put on wait, or pretend I am the one you're going to call. I will put on waiting music. You can think about your name and what you want to ask, and then hang up and you call the office. That's what he's saying. What if the kid says, "Help, I'm bad at saying no"? His answer is, many people are afraid of disappointing others, which is why they become bad at saying no, even if they really want to. But saying no politely saves you a lot of time and worry. You don't always have to justify it, nor do you have to use a white lie. Just say, "Thank you very much for asking me, but I unfortunately do not have the opportunity. Please ask again another time." Help, someone's criticized me. Learn to accept criticism with elegance. If you do not agree with the criticism, you can say that, quote, "I had not thought of it that way, but I will certainly take it to heart. However, I experience it this way." Remember that it's not true even if someone says so. It's just their opinion. Help, I did something wrong. If you know that you've made a mistake, it's best for your conscience and reputation if you do the following. Number 1, be quick. 2, admit the mistake you made, and that you're sorry for what you've inflicted on the other person. 3, apologize face to face. 4, say how you will correct the error and make it right again. Do you agree with this logic path? Is this the right way to apologize? If this is an issue, how do Gen Z apologize?
99% of the time you apologize. If the consequence is lifetime in jail, follow the instructions on the other side of just break the glass and find the hidden box where you could and get a new identity and plastic surgery and that. But yeah, I guess in most cases it's just easier to admit to the mistake.
Yeah, Javier Olivia says step one: destroy all evidence.
I mean, like I've thought about these things to myself. Like, okay, most of the time trivial stuff happened or semi-trivial stuff, but let's say you did actually risk severe jail time or something. I mean, yeah, let's say like you hit somebody on the. Like say like you were driving drunk or something and you hit somebody with your car and then like you were asked later if you actually did it. You know, it's like the Phil Collins has like a song about this. It's like with Genesis, dreaming while you sleep. It's kind of similar to In the Air Tonight, but it's about like you hit someone with the car and you have to just live with it for the rest of your life. I mean, I honestly I don't know. I can't recommend that.
Also,
to admit to it, honestly,
you know, this is advice that would have been good for Espen Tagen a while ago. If you get caught in something, and especially by the police, you should probably admit it the first time around, because the punishment for lying is greater than punishment for doing the crime usually.
Yeah, I mean,
but I mean, he won't see that because he's in jail now. So
he's in jail. He's reading books and getting jacked.
Yeah, he's
like
reading Andrew
the accounts on Twitter recommend you to.
Help! I have no one to talk to. If you want to be interesting, start by being interested. Say something first in a conversation. It is often enough with a hello or something tone deaf like, nice weather it is today. Let the other one have the chance to be the second one to say something. 2, don't be afraid to small talk. Ask open questions like, do you have any animals? Do you own any animals? Or pets, I guess. Do you know the host of this party? Etc. 3, ask follow-up questions to what they say. And 4, stop thanking everyone for having the talk and remember to sneak in your name. You will be remembered the next time. The last one, help, I have to do housework. I have to do chores. The most important thing you have to learn when it comes to housework or chores is don't put it away. What? That's a weird translation. One moment. Don't put it away. Don't leave it. Just he literally says just don't just get it done, right? He's saying anything that takes less than 5 minutes to do it right away, because otherwise it's going to be harder to do later. And that's the classic, you know, Jordan Peterson type. Doing the dishes the day after is always harder than doing the dishes the day of, just because, you know, the crust forms. Now sometimes you can't do that and you have to deal with it and do the dishes the day after, but if you have 5 minutes, you can get a lot done.
This has also gotten easier for me. It's like, say when you have kids, for example, or your schedule gets busier, you just have to do these things, so they just pile up, and
and it sort of twists you into like almost a bit of a reward when you have like, I have 5 minutes to do the dishes, because you get something quote unquote real done. And it's not that I don't enjoy having a child, but the thing with babies, at least so far, is that the individual tasks aren't very difficult, but it's just that they never stop, right? So having something you can be like, I finished the dishes, that's a thing that is complete. It's not like I'm going to have to redo it in like 10 minutes.
And I find it's so easy to live with your own mess, but if you live with other people, you very quickly see the problem there, right? And you try to clean up after yourself, because you get so sick of other people leaving a mess. I could probably be better at that, but yeah.
For the best Nordic pro-natalist podcast, the best podcast, they've got big coal, clean coal, American coal, Russian coal, Israeli coal, and the best Vanta black coal. $5 from Florida Man. Thank you, Florida Man. That means
much appreciated.
So much,
yeah.
I believe is the line. Florida Man is a mainstay of our comment section, and it's rare that we get to see him live. Okay, I guess we will move on to. I think we have time to do the podcasting. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should do the Musk first, and then we could.
We'll do Musk first.
Do the podcasting as a bonus
in the interest of time. Yeah. Let me bring. Oh, that's not right.
I don't know if you want to do articles or film clips, but I posted the clip from the recent Sean Hannity interview he did on Fox News, where he's talking about vandalism.
Yeah. I'm bringing up. We'll do both because we have one Norwegian article and we have the Sean Hannity thing. Which that Hannity interview was really, for some reason, when I saw it the first time, I always feel like Musk looks like an NPC from, like the old Fallout games or something like that, when they're just like these like semi-animated, still moving images, right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
these like early
Elder Scrolls or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something about the squareness, and he has the fake hairline as well, so it doesn't help. And so a lot of guys, people have commented this with like Andrew Tate's brother, Tristan Tate, who Andrew Tate, he just kind of shaves his head and that's how he deals with it. But Tristan has this very elaborate setup to cover up his hair loss, right? And people say that he looks like a PlayStation 1 character because of it. I don't have the photos, but it's something about like when you get this hairline, because it's grafted like from the back of your head onto the front, and you get a straight line, and it's quite unnatural, I think, for most people to people's hair kind of recedes unsymmetrically usually, so they will have kind of their hair just becomes like a series of straight lines that don't really make any sense, so that contributes to the PlayStation 1 look. But Elon also has a very square face, so
he does, yeah. All right, we'll play the clip. You can tell me to stop if you want. Otherwise,
well, it's only 1 minute,
so just let it run.
Put ablaze in one of your dealerships in Vegas. I've seen this happen all over the country. Bullets are being fired. Charging stations are put ablaze. Teslas are being put ablaze. You have experienced assassination, threats of assassination for you and your family. What have you done that warrants this? Because I see nothing that you have done except help our country.
Yeah, I mean, it's really come as quite a shock to me that there's this level of really hatred and violence from the left. I always thought the left, or Democrats, were supposed to be the party of empathy, the party of caring, and yet they're burning.
They've gone insane, Ludwig. The left
has gone insane. So much for the tolerant left, isn't that the meme?
Yeah.
Taking down cars, they're firebombing dealerships, they're firing bullets into dealerships, they're just smashing up Teslas. Tesla is a peaceful company. We've never done anything harmful. I've never done anything harmful. I've only done productive things. So I think we just have a deranged. There's some kind of mental illness thing going on here, because this doesn't make any sense.
Now, setting fire to Teslas or EVs in general is a really shitty thing to do, because they're a bitch to put out. Like burning, what's it called, those batteries?
Yeah, you see some of these videos where they're just exploding, and it looks like almost like fireworks, because the batteries are starting to pop. And I made some comments about this, because these are expensive cars. Like the car I drive is an old Toyota, and it has a tax value of $1,000. Like if it blew up, I wouldn't even care. But these cars are really expensive. But so
yeah, it's a bunch of like graphics card you're setting on fire. Oh, and some tires as well, I guess.
Essentially. But I made some comments about this, because I mean it varies from state to state if you're in America, because this is happening other places as well, but it's mostly American Tesla dealerships where people are showing up like with Molotov cocktails, and they're setting fire to the cars, and they're throwing rocks. Some people are using guns. And the punishment just for, say, setting fire to a car, for example, it could be many years in prison, just if you're caught, essentially, or you have to monetarily compensate for it, which is really expensive. Right, so they're these are really hard measures, and you're seeing kind of the fulfillment of a much kind of edgier left, in a sense. I've talked about this previously, these sort of Aaron Bushnell characters who are showing up and setting fire to themselves, or doing these sort of insane protest antics. And I think you could talk about like the motivation behind this, but I mean, from like the sort of core MAGA cringe people who have sort of bought into their own ideas, it wouldn't make any sense, because like in their worldview, it's either USAID paid for organized protest. I think he even says this in one of these interviews, that he thinks it's like Democrat organized protests. So it's either because they're being sheltered by like the anarcho tyranny or the woke capitalism or something. But they still seem to be doing this, and I mean, of course, the go-to explanation is is pretty simple. I mean, this is like Postal. He fired them. Like, what did I do to make this? Well, he fired those people, right? I think that's one of the episode we did like straight after the election.
Or he fired those people who these organizations care about, right?
Yeah, I mean, many of them are government employees, right, who work for this sort of USAID stuff. There's like thousands of people who are without a job. So, okay, what are they going to do, right? I'm not saying that there's like 100% corollary. Some of them are just general nut jobs, but there seems to be a coalescing of like in really edgy left, where their worldview kind of makes sense, because it didn't 3 years ago. If you think about like 2022 with peak woke capitalism and like BreadTube on YouTube and that stuff, where they're talking about like the punching a Nazi and capitalism turning into fascism and this stuff, while at the same time all of the big corporations are pushing gay pride and all of these sort of, they're saying the same things, right? You have like the Vosh on YouTube talking about intersectionality, and so is Coca-Cola and Microsoft talking about the same things.
Yeah, and in a sense, Musk strides up and says, "Wow, that straw man looks really cool. I'm going to try to be like that."
He's just sort of slotted himself into kind of a caricature where that Vosh worldview makes sense. In a way, it's very strange when they talk about capitalism is going to turn into like this fascist, populist stuff or whatever. I mean, I think from their perspective, in this kind of coalesced, kind of socialist, tranny left, like their worldview kind of makes sense under Trump.
Yeah, now they're actually the resistance.
Yeah, they actually can be the resistance now, because they also don't have any political representation anymore, because like the general Democrat Party is in tatter.
Which means we get to use violence. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not meant to be as a kind of justification, but it's really more of like kind of directionality prediction of like where is this going to go? Like, where else does this impulse go for these people? Because they're not being pandered to, in a sense. Like, he's not.
So, question then: would the American left, I guess, sort of like the mainstream Democrats, or let's say the Democratic Party, right? Because obviously the Democratic Party can't run on a platform for these people, right? They're too radical. Would they have to... Do you think they would have to become more right-wing? And I say right-wing in giant air quotes, to sort of... as a fig leaf to MAGA voters in the next election cycle? Or are they just waiting out the Trump admin? And if they do become more quote-unquote based Democrats, are they just going to alienate their original voter base even more? What I'm essentially getting at is the woke being put away so hard that the radicals are still going to be radicals 10 years from now?
It's a very good question, because it seems like the consensus is that they should try to pivot toward the center and put away the woke and be more based, quote unquote. And you're seeing that with like Gavin Newsom and these guys who are trying to do their own podcasts, and we're talking about like only two genders, but it's not working. They're not getting any boosts in approval ratings. They're doing even worse than MAGA. Like it's just total failure on all fronts. So that's the question. Like if they keep trying to pivot to pull away MAGA voters, and it's not working, then maybe they're gonna just do like a more kind of hard left pivot. I mean, it seems wacko, because it's becoming harder to defend these kind of edgier lefty types, but it doesn't seem like it's the rightward pivots is working. But on that note, I mean, I was thinking about like this kind of growing discontent with the left and the Trump admin's ability to do red meat, or to do kind of containment for them, because that's going to be an issue coming forward if that's a growing movement that essentially like they're affecting Elon's bottom line now, right? Because see, I just assembled a couple of stats because I think it's interesting to read out. It's always stuff you can look up, but just for entertainment's sake. So the breakdown of Elon's net worth is that it's about 60% of his net worth is Tesla stock, where he is the largest shareholder at about 13% of the stock. And this amounts to about $132 billion. Second biggest, he has like about 25% of his wealth in SpaceX, 8% in XAI, and then the rest is small parts of Neuralink, Boring Company, and this a lot of miscellaneous things. So Elon is not, he is the richest man in the world currently, among a group of other USA-based tech billionaires in the same sectors. Apart from, like, if you look at the sort of Forbes lists, like the only exception is actually Bernard Arnault or something. Like, it's like one French guy who owns Louis Vuitton, the luxury handbag company. He's like the only sort of like top 10 billionaire, and everybody else is like owns Google, Microsoft, Facebook, or something like that. So it's just a fun fact. But Elon is sort of, he's not like Bill Gates, who sold himself out of Microsoft and has like this diversified portfolio. He's very exposed with Tesla. And not just in the boycotts, but where people are doing this kind of stuff with impunity, it does hurt his bottom line, and it puts him in a kind of risky spot, not just like from a governance perspective, but also in terms of his own financial future. Let's say, I mean, it's unlikely that it's going to go to a point where he becomes number two. Like, number two right now is Mark Zuckerberg, who is like $100 billion poorer than Musk. So
yeah, I mean, Meta is going to have to, the metaverse is actually going to have to be something if he's going to be able to pull that one off.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla stock has to drop to like half of what it is now, and even less. It has to drop to almost zero before he ends up there, unless there's some radical change to the other parts of the portfolio. But Tesla is publicly traded and really more of like a retail good. Yeah. So that's why it's so exposed. Like SpaceX is really more about, they're getting subsidies.
Yeah.
For it, so it's a lot more safe. But it's kind of, the Tesla stock is it's a very dedicated place where you can hit them. It's not like the woke capital where it's like, okay, you boycott Nestle chocolate drink because they have a pride flag, and then okay, they just have all the other chocolate flavors as well. But with Tesla, it's like it's a very clear, soft white underbelly of Musk that they can target, and so far it seems to be working in a sense. But okay, what is he doing about it? He doesn't seem to really have a strategy other than posting videos of black guys talking about Teslas on his on his walls. I'm posting a link here because I thought this was the funniest one. It's like this Zoomer black guy who's talking about Teslas. I think it speaks for itself.
It's not even a joke. That's been his feed this entire.
Actually, let me. Tesla hate is so forced, my nigga. I was one of those niggas too before I actually got one. Ain't gonna lie. Actually, let me correct myself. Before I rented a Tesla, like, bro, when I'm in a Tesla, like, it just makes my life 10 times easier. I don't know. It warms up in 15 seconds. You can do it through your phone. The charging is really easy. You don't have to worry about gas. There are no maintenance issues, bro. There's a big screen with everything you need. The acceleration is extremely busting. The lowest model gets 4.9 seconds. The lowest model. I don't think y'all understand how crazy that is. The lowest of low. Hands down, honest to God, one of the easiest cars I've ever driven. Like, it's just like, you just go. You know what I'm saying? You have to worry about.
That's right. And that's the selling point. Like, if you don't care about cars, if you're just going to go from A to B, you get a lot of mileage out of a Tesla, especially in Norway, where you don't have to pay tax on it. So, and that's sort of the competitive advantage that Tesla has been enjoying, right?
Yeah, but even that is evaporating, right? I don't think
it is, because the others are catching up now, right?
Yeah. Other dealerships are making similar
car,
products.
quote unquote, that Tesla is going to have to produce is going to be much higher quality than the current ones, the Model 3 and the Model Y, if they're going to keep up.
or it's going to have to, because the stock price is just so much higher than every other competing company in the same market. So a lot of it is based on future potential, right? And it's the specter of the self-driving car that's kind of been holding a lot of that up for a long time. And I don't know at what point when another year we don't have the self-driving cars, where people just kind of, okay, this is not happening. And then the price.
Any moment now we have the AI,
Yeah, but that's with most of Elon's companies. It's like they have some promise of some kind of insane thing that's going to happen in the future, which hasn't manifested. But maybe we get general AI. Maybe we get the self-driving car. Maybe we get to Mars, and then it's going to be worth like the actual price tag. But not yet.
So we have a £5 donation from JD is the new gold standard. He says, quote, "For every Tesla that goes up, I put another child in a lithium mine. GG," from Elon Leopold Respecter Musk. I mean, in a sense, you can just replace the cars as long as Tesla remains strong.
All right, but do you want to look at the podcast stuff, or should we look at the brain drain?
We'll do the podcast thing first, and then we'll do the brain drain. So we'll pop back to Europe for a moment, specifically Norway, because we talked a bit about podcasts and the impact on the election. And apparently, it's election season here in Norway, which means that this year round, all the politicians, they don't want to do interviews; they just want to go on podcasts. They want to go on other people's podcasts. They want to have their own podcasts. They've looked to America, and America has said, podcasts win you elections, which arguably, yeah. So I'm just going to read, and you can interrupt me when you feel like it. Here we have a couple of Norwegian politicians. Podcasts can decide the general election. Podcasts can determine the coming autumn elections. Many politicians have thrown themselves around and signed up for you, the listener. As popular as the podcasts have become, I will not be surprised if someone declares that they have influenced voters, and thus they have influenced election results, says Henrik G. Bastians. He is a media researcher and has followed the development from the first podcast in Norway since it was launched in 2005. He says that the podcast format has gone from being pure entertainment to having greater influence in political elections. Any party that is going to campaign have to think about how to reach the voters, says Tina Brew from the Conservatives. When there are so many who see what is said in podcasts, and when podcasts reach out to so many, we have to consider whether we should be present there, says the deputy leader of the Conservative Party. The 38-year-old says that she's also a supporter of the podcast format, but emphasizes that she's not wholly positive. You can see that some podcasts actively contribute to more polarization, or they give a wrong picture of how things are connected. So the solution is more podcasts. Let's see here. Sometimes the participation is about us being guests in podcasts to get corrected on an impression of something, she adds. In addition to participating in other people's podcasts, the Conservatives also have their own podcast. I didn't even know that. It's called the Storting, which is our Reichstag, our government building, the restaurant, apparently, the restaurant of the Storting. It has around 6,000 downloads per episode, so 6,000 people are listening to the Conservatives podcast in Norway, apparently. I didn't know that. Okay. But they're not alone. The deputy leader in the Conservatives is not alone in exhibiting, in participating in podcasts. A politician for the Reds, the Communists, Mimir Christiansen, prioritizes it highly, especially independent podcasts. Maybe we'll get him on the Longhouse.
Yeah, he has populist potential, though I don't know what exactly we ask him about.
I have no idea what we would ask him about. I think it's important, to be honest. A lot of the rhetoric that comes out of the Reds, the Communists, is very, just ideologically driven and not very practical. I think it's important to be part of independent podcasts. One thing is that many are listening in, but another thing is that you get a unique opportunity to speak out that you don't get in the old media format, says Mimer Christensen. He's visited Wolfgang Wee Uncut, which I know he says independent podcasts, but that's like, calling music indie music. It's no longer about them not having publishers, right? Like Wolfgang Wee is probably one of the biggest podcasts in Norway, right?
I think so, but I'm actually, if it was a stock, I would probably divest from him. And this is kind of just an aside, because I've seen a lot of other podcasts, like say we talked about Ola Asbjørn Ness, who's just making his own thing right now, and it's he's able to be faster in terms of responding to events, and it's shorter. And I think like the kind of 2-hour format.
So you're saying that the populist aspect of that is going to go away from me because he's more detail oriented and he brings on more nerds essentially.
It's too long, I think. Which, I mean, and you can see it with Joe Rogan as well. It's kind of becoming too niche with its audience focus. I think with Wolfgang, it's like these lifestyle influencers who keep coming on talking about the low carb and oiling yourself up.
That's what I don't sort of vibe with Wolfgang's podcast, is that he's very schizophrenic in the topics. Like he'll have a string of like philosophers and someone like Asle Toje, conservative sort of think tank guys or something, who talk about like politics and philosophy and history, and then it's like, oh, and now we're gonna do keto stream for like four episodes, and it's like, what are you doing? Right? It's very, very what's the word? It's like
a bit jarring, schizophrenic, as you said, or lacks focus a little bit, and of course that's probably like we have that problem as well. I think we do have that problem, a little bit more focus, but I think
we only quote unquote have whatever amount of subscribers we have, right?
Yeah, no, but I think with Wolfgang, it's the 2-hour format. It's just too many topics on one video. It becomes like there's an inconsistency of the product in a sense, and it's also too slow, where it's like things are happening so quickly now that when like you have to bring these people into the studio and you have to sort of agree upon that they show up there to be there physically, and they have to talk for 2 hours, when sometimes you just need somebody to show up on a video call and talk for 30 minutes to cover an event and get that quicker. And I think that Ola Asbjørn pulls that off a lot better. People just want to hear, takes on the recent stuff that's happening from somebody with expertise, instead of having like these kind of body oil seminars for 2 hours in the room or something. So I just don't see.
They're not populist enough, and they're not autistic enough. So they're not. So you have to do the Longhouse thing, where either we do like a 1 to 1.5 hour stream, or we go 4 hours. You can't do the in between.
Well, I don't know. It's hard for me to understand why people do like 2 to 4 hour streams, because I never watch anything like that myself. I like to keep things shorter. Yeah, but I wasn't in the audience.
That's true.
I was on the supply side of that. So I don't really understand.
I don't listen to a lot of 2-hour shows like that. 4 hour. Maybe I do as like background noise for very specific videos, if I'm like, coding or something, right?
Yeah, but like with Joe Rogan and Wolfgang, it had like this kind of edgy promise in the beginning, because you brought out people who you don't hear from a lot otherwise. That you don't have access to someone like Asle Toje or with Joe Rogan, like a lot of these guys that you just didn't have access to, like people in who are musicians, or people in the UFC or the sports, or comedians or guys like that. You did not have access to 90 minutes of them talking,
another side of them, right?
For just answering questions. But now that's like just everywhere. Everybody's providing that. It's like this, the problem with the unique selling point and the focus, and like just that's kind of where I see they're just being out. Yeah. Bill Wilson is correct.
Bill Wilson says podcast occupied government, indeed.
Well, I think that is the Trump admin, isn't it? If you take the line that you're not interested, you don't want to have people from the deep state or have experience in bureaucracy or something, well, you just get podcasters. That's the alternative. But sorry for the digression.
Uncut is Norway's largest independent podcast, a podcast with well over 100,000 weekly downloads. Quote, speak freely. To speak freely can be done everywhere, but hearing interesting people talk for a long time uninterrupted, I think, was a shortcoming in the Norwegian public square. So my own project is much more about ideas and experience and knowledge than freedom of expression, Wolfgang Weed tells the paper. So he thinks it's a strength that he's sort of meandering a bit. We'll see, I guess. As you said, your major prediction that if this was a stock, you would, I guess, de-invest or divest.
Yeah, because I think the competition is getting stiffer. People are just realizing that this is the next thing, and they'll try to, you're seeing other people try to get in on this game and creating alternatives. And I think people will prefer that for specific things. At least that's like my consumption trajectory on this.
The podcast is not tied to a political party, but in one previous examination, it emerged that the podcast has a large proportion of listeners from the right, which is kind of to be expected. Mainstream media in Norway does have a leftward slant, so it's not really anything new. Mimir Christiansen also has his own podcast with social commentator Magnus Marsdal. It is considered a left-wing podcast and is simply called Mimir and Marsdal. And according to the Pod Top, it has just under 30,000 listeners. They're simply talking about politics and anything else that might interest them. Part of free speech, many Norwegian parties and individual politicians today have their own podcasts. Dude, can you imagine keeping up with like all the podcasts of all the of all the politicians?
Well, I think for people who are more savvy, this is the case, right? I noticed this even when when I was working.
It was my job to do politics, right?
It's an easy way to get out there, right? And it's very cheap to produce. I mean, I was noticing this even like maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was working in Oslo, how the standard it would be for like, okay, you start a company or some, and you just create a podcast and put it on your LinkedIn or something, because I mean, it's just so easy. You'll just sit and talk for half an hour and try to bring in people on the weight of your charisma or something like this.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. Yeah, you can just. It's entirely self-generated.
Many Norwegian parties and individual politicians today have their own podcast. There are more and more large independent podcasts, shout out to the Longhouse, where you do not have to pay attention to the balance, as public broadcasters will have to do by law, he says. Independent producers can do whatever they want. However, he emphasizes that this is part of freedom of expression in Norway, and you're allowed to fill it with the voices and perspectives that you want. Can affect how people... He's also, by the way, he's holding a report here, and it's called The Big Podcast Report. That's the name of the report. So, it's real. He's got the Big Podcast Report. How this will happen in Norway, we will probably see for the first time during the election campaign this autumn, he says. When podcasts have strong profiles, regardless of whether they're right-wing or left-wing, the listener is happy to look for things that confirm their views. In this way, the podcast can reinforce a conviction they already have in politics. If there are polarized podcasts with many listeners, it can affect how people vote, adds the researcher. This is exactly what happened during the US presidential election in the autumn of 2024. Many believe that Donald Trump's performance in the world's most popular podcast, quote, The Joe Rogan Experience, and the fact that Kamala Harris did not appear as a guest in the same podcast, may have influenced the American election result. Boy, I would have loved to have seen a Kamala Joe Rogan. That would have been a train wreck for her, I think.
Well, I don't know, because he never pushes back on anything, right? Even less so than he did last time. But it's a kind of it's a story that I've followed for a while, because I predicted the election wrong, and then I found out I basically learned that she didn't appear on that podcast, and you got the impression that she didn't prioritize that. But more information's come out later that she actually did try to get a hold of him, and he was the one who was sort of stalling that one, likely because of Elon Musk. So he was trying to. It sounded more like Rogan was sort of pressured into stopping that from happening than the other way around, by just constantly giving, you have to come to Texas to do this, and you can only show up between these hours, and just giving stalling and just giving impossible demands for it.
Here at home, politician and former leader of the socialist left, Audun Lysbakken, launches his own podcast this week. Jesus Christ, there's so many podcasts. I find that people have a great need to understand what is happening, to see the connections and the apparent chaos around us. I share that feeling, and the podcast is an attempt to help both myself and the listeners to understand, he says. Will you be listening to the Socialist Left podcast?
Well, I might have to check this out now, right, and see if there's anything.
I kind of have to now, yeah.
It does depend on the context. If there's some specific thing I want to have their takes on, and that's, of course, where you go. And you can get it directly from the source.
Having to spend, like, hours to find it. But maybe now, you know, the newspapers will just be like, this is what some so-and-so said on this podcast, right?
Yeah, that's going to be the entire thing. We just need to have AI parsing podcasts and then just snipping out transcripts, commenting on it. You can just have the newspaper operating itself on generative AI. But no, I mean, as a sort of finishing comment on the podcastification of things, it's I mean, you know, on one side, yeah, you enjoy the kind of free format of it, but kind of the problem of it is kind of the accumulation of noise, slop, and crap in the digital space. Yeah, I've talked about this before, but it's really like the populist problem in general. And it's going to sound like this is like anti-rightoid or whatever, but it's really not. But I think the right, especially the American right, has this problem more than anybody else. But it's really like politics as noise. That's sort of the best way I can explain it. Where
turns out, you know, giving everyone a megaphone doesn't give you, you know, freedom. It just gives you bleeding ears.
Yeah, the thing is that it's just the politics disappear from the politics. Essentially, like you're having a political podcast where the elephant in the room is politics, and nobody is actually asking questions about, you know, implementation of policy or trying to hold politicians accountable or make them answer, you know, tough questions, because otherwise they just won't show up for the podcast, right? So they get a megaphone where they can just sit and talk. And, you know, if the guy asks any hard questions, they can just not show up. And okay, it's freedom of speech, but there's kind of, it really breaks with any logical consistency within the politics itself. Like, you're not actually getting any answers to the questions that you have, or demanding that they try to stay consistent to what they've promised or anything. It's kind of, you hang out with them. And then you like them, and they say stuff, and the noise is accumulating. But there's kind of, the sort of the argument part is completely gone in favor of just kind of how much you like someone or something else, and there's just a bunch of crap information accumulating that you don't really, it shouldn't be relevant for whether who you vote for or who you pledge allegiance to. Really, you should ask hard questions about what they're going to do, what they think, how they want to solve problems, and not just about like that time they hung out with their dog or tried to psychedelic drugs or something. It's just crap, really.
Yeah. Let's move on to Remigration. Do you have any?
I don't know how much time do you think we can stay here? So
I have
I think maybe 15 minutes.
An hour, at least 15 minutes to half an hour is good.
Okay, good. Well, I don't know. I sent you that one image on the Telegram chat there, which was like, this is like 2016 Trump core. I don't know if you can find it, because I was
Turk.
No, it's not the Turk. It's like with the Elon Sig Heiling one, because it has like this kind of boomer lib bloomf.
Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah.
To it. Which,
it's real Ben Garrison hours. Yeah. Let's see here. Save as, and then I have to find it.
It's not that easy with the web browsers.
Telegram is always annoying. Yeah. Here we go. And share screen.
You have to share it, because I'm just laughing at it. Like, regardless of, I saw it and I was just thinking like, this is like 2016 shitlib stuff. But then again, I was thinking a little bit. I had it in the back of my head, and then suddenly like these articles started popping up. I linked you one in the private chat from Politico about
the one about the scientists.
Yeah, about scientists.
So this is the comic here is, I guess, that Elon and Trump is scaring all the brainiacs away.
Uncle Adolf scared the Jewish brains into the United States, and then Elon is going to scare the big brains back to Europe again.
Importantly,
they're going to take the science with them in a handbag.
It's not the Jews that are fleeing from America.
Anglos, I think, that are going to leave, so the Jews will stay. But
yeah. So Politico writes here, Europe looks to poach U.S. researchers as Trump cuts funding. 12 EU capitals want programs to bring American scholars over the pond. A group of European countries is devising a strategy to poach researchers in the United States in response to American government cuts in education and research. 12 governments said the European Union needs an, quote, attractivity boom to bring over talent from abroad, quote, who might suffer from research interference and ill-motivated and brutal funding cuts, in a letter to European Commission seen by Politico. The undaunted letter was addressed to EU Innovation Commissioner Ekaterina Sarieva and signed by France, the Czech Republic, Austria, Slovakia, Estonia, Latvia, Spain, Slovenia, Germany, Greece, Bulgaria, and Romania. It's urgent, quote, it's urgent to organize ourselves to welcome talents who would like or need to leave the United States, French Research Minister Philippe Baptiste told Politico in a statement. The US is not mentioned by name in the letter, but there are explicit references. Quote, the current international context reminds us that freedom of science can be put at risk anywhere and at any time. The text read. I'm a bit skeptical to just we have to be extremely picky about which scientists we're getting, right?
You don't want gender scientists, okay? You can keep them.
Since Donald Trump took office in January, the U.S. research and education landscape has been hit with massive cuts. The U.S. Education Department has started cutting roughly half of its workforce, and several universities, including Johns Hopkins University, have cut jobs because of the loss of government funding. The letter included several suggestions on how to attract researchers, including dedicated funding, an immigration framework, and strengthening partnerships with, quote, other leading scientific nations. The countries want the Commission to organize a meeting of EU research and ministers in coming weeks to devise a plan, they wrote. Interestingly, though, sorry, my brain just caught up to this list here. Denmark isn't on this list, and Denmark is actually doing pretty big things. I mean, they're doing Ozempic, they're doing other... a lot of these big name,
they're big on biotech for sure.
Yeah, they're really pushing that stuff. But apparently they feel like they're doing fine. Let's see here. The countries want the Commission to organize a meeting of EU research ministers in the coming weeks to devise a plan. In the past week, several universities across Europe have launched attempts to attract US-based researchers. One of Brussels' Free University Brussels on Monday announced 12 positions for international researchers with a specific focus on American scholars. The French IMSL University also launched a Safe Space for Science program, referring to a context where some scientists in the United States may feel threatened or hindered in their research. This has to actively target sort of gender studies. Am I just reading it wrong?
Well, it sounds like that, yeah. You're using those safe spaces and
yeah, and if you feel threatened in your research, right? Yeah, I'm having some sort of reservations about what the kind of quality of people we're getting. I say we, but I mean France is going to get.
Most of this is quite theoretical at this point, right? But there is recently a article I saw on CNN where they talked about a French researcher that was denied entry to the US because of some anti-Trump stuff he had on his phone. I don't know how serious that was, sure. But there is something there in terms of I guess general hostility towards academia, right? Under the US government. I mean that's not speculative, right? I mean if you've been following, General Moldberg and some of the Silicon Valley mafia orthodoxy, it's a lot of it's a war on academia, right? The cathedral and these types of institutions. It's pretty explicit with a lot of these elements. So these people are probably going to look to go other places if it's possible for them. But I did try to look, ask various AIs about this question, like if people who want to hypothetically migrate to Europe from the United States, like what are actually good options for them. And the stuff that's coming up, it's like the UK is apparently currently like a very popular destination for people who are moving from
the UK is a very popular destination for a lot of people from a lot of places, like
which but I mean, of course, it's I think that lives on the name value more than anything. It's like people have an image of London streets and stuff, but we've had like Dissident Nomad on and people who are talking about
I mean,
urban
we've
decay.
seen it for ourselves, right?
Yeah, we have urban decay and the United Kingdom, immigration, bad political operations, general, and the economics is not very good either. Like they've had an issue trying to reestablish good systems after they broke with the EU. So you're going to have to settle for a much smaller salary likely, and probably more, less aesthetic experience than what you see on the postcards. It's going to be like this sort of UK kebab shop wape, where
the real UK aesthetics,
the UK aesthetic stuff, which is sort of so I think that's it lives on the name value, but it's a bit more of a mixed bag. So number 2 that comes up is Ireland.
By the way, sorry. I feature that guy who runs the UK aesthetics, the Drukpa Conley guy on Twitter. He was part of like a report in a UK newspaper recently. Like they referred to his account specifically, and they said that his account was posting things where, nothing is ever said directly. But it's a very impressionistic style of posting, and all he's doing usually is just posting like real life images of the UK. It's just like, what is the meaning? What did he mean by this?
Well, it is a style, and I quite like it.
It is a style. Yeah. He has a style, but I don't feel it's very impressionistic.
Right. Okay. But yeah, as a sort of second option, then, if you're disenchanted by the United Kingdom, you should consider Ireland, because it has EU membership. It's been doing very strongly economically, and because it's been turned into a tax haven, right? I think that's lost on a lot of people when they talk about Ireland, because they just think about like Catholic Protestant wars. And the IRA and bombing and poverty and this kind of stuff. But now it's like, EU member receiving generous subsidies, tax haven. A lot of these companies, tech companies, have moved the headquarters there. So yeah, if you have like a tech skill or something like that, and I think that's an attractive place to live. And the bonus is that you can talk as much shit about Israel as you like, because that's that's acceptable in Ireland. I mean, it's probably, like we've talked about this, it's like one of the most Israel hostile. Well, I think it just has to do with their general tradition of there's like the Sinn Féin party and their relation to Israel. Like they're very big Palestine supporters. Basically, they see themselves as a kind of Palestine, I think.
Okay, sure.
I mean, in the UK, that's not the case. I think Zionism is very strong there, but in Ireland, it's like one of the most hostile towards Israel, and this is an issue. Like, the Trump admin is probably good on many freedom of speech points, but it's not the Israel stuff. I mean, people are being deported for for protesting Israel too hard, or if they support Hamas, which has been designated a terrorist organization. The problem is that Hamas is the government of Palestine, so it's a bit hard to support Palestine if you and you end up conflating these things, and you just get deported. So some people, they want to travel to Iran because they can go to like the Holocaust conferences and stuff. I mean, you can't go that hard in Ireland, but I think it's I think you're well within the zone to say things you want about Israel there. So that's why I see that as like a kind of good option if people are considering the UK. Maybe consider Ireland instead. I guess other alternatives would be like the Netherlands, Amsterdam. I think for the people who are coming there, I think the job market is good. They speak good English. generally sort of progressive culture. I think it would be easy to find, work if you have like, you're high skilled. And I think Denmark is sort of similar. I don't know, like the immigration process might be slightly harder because you're getting around to like some of these Scandi countries. I think the culture might be a little bit harder to acclimate to, because the language barrier is something you have to think about. Like because why do people move? They move for economic reasons, and they move for cultural reasons, and of course if they have like barriers to like language, for example, and that's going to be like a huge stopper for them, which is sort of why I think there are many people who in the United States, like they want to move to places like Russia, and I've talked about this like with revealed preference before, but
sure,
I really think like language and like the fact that you have to learn Cyrillic to go there is probably like the biggest the biggest blocker for a lot of those potential political refugees from the Western woke regime. And not because like they genuinely don't want to go to Russia. I think like the type of people who want to go to Russia are not the type of people who are going to be able to teach themselves like Cyrillic and fluid Russian in an adult as adults, basically. So I think that's really kind of the big problems. And in Europe, you have countries say like Bulgaria or I don't know if it's something similar, maybe in the former Yugoslavic countries, that the language barrier is just going to be too difficult, even though if you appreciate the aesthetics or the culture there. So it'll be then, I guess, countries like either Germany is pretty high, I guess. The English is not that good, but the economy is relatively stable in terms of jobs and immigration prospects. And then it's kind of like the Scandi countries. You think I'm missing anything? Have we overlooked any kind of hidden gems in the Eurozone?
I don't know. Well, Monaco, if you can afford it.
Yeah, but isn't that just a tax haven, though? I mean, I assume they actually want to live like a real.
I don't
place.
think it's. To be honest, I think if you actually want to live in Monaco, that's going to be quite difficult. I think they have some strict, don't they? Let's see. How can you get a house in Monaco? I think you have to. You maybe not. I thought you had like to have some sort of form of down payment or something, like to just be able to have a passport or something. But maybe I'm remembering wrong. All right, whatever. No, I think you covered the majority there.
Yep. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah, I'm just looking through the list here to make sure we have covered everything. Javier Olivia says it's pretty cheap to live in Ukraine right now. Yeah, oof. It might be at least some places.
Yeah, if you only go by cost of living, then I guess that's pretty good. You could go set up a money lawn. No, I won't make too many of the jokes, but I don't think that's where you wanna. That's where you want to be currently. I think most people want no part of that.
Obviously, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, we could bring up some slop, but I honestly I'm not feeling it, and we won't disrespect our audience in that way. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for checking out the stream. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow Luddic Path as well on Twitter. If there's anything else you want to do with the rest of your night, I do really recommend reading Morgoth's Reviews' latest Substack. I think his latest. Stuck in the Middle with EU. I think it's a very good take or roundup on a lot of the things that you, Luddic Path, have been sort of shining a light on for a long time, that you have been getting in our comments to a certain degree some shit on, and have been, I think, rightfully vindicated on. So yeah, check out Morgoth's latest Substack. That's a good read. Okay, well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Anything you want to add?
Nope. Goodbye.
We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.